Thank you for joining me today. I'm Nathan Garner, the Project Manager and Tech Support Team Leader at Dynamic CCTV. Today we're going to be doing HikCentral overview. So HikCentral's the licensed VMS software from Hikvision, which is generally a server-based system but can be used for smaller installs as well to get more advanced features. So we're going to take a look through that today. I've got a couple of slides to go through, but primarily I'll actually show you it on my test server that I've got set up here on my laptop as to go through the different systems that we can do with this. So we can go on through this. So a lot of people don't realize just like kind of what is HikCentral. So it is a licensed CMS software, and it allows you to centrally control multiple Hikvision devices. So whether or not it's access control by Hikvision or the intercom systems now are integrated, as well as standard CCTV systems, including both TVI and IP as well for those. So with HikCentral, you get the advanced alarm and event handling functions. So this might be where you have a control room kind of scenario where your operators would receive the events first, but if they're not received by the operator or they're not dealt with by the operator, it can then go to their managers, but the manager wouldn't get the event if it's been dealt with correctly. So that can be done through HikCentral. And it can also handle a lot more users and client streams with cameras on site and remote sites added into the HikCentral server. So it is a lot more scalable than your standard free IVMS 4200 software is as a comparison, which we'll compare few bits between the two later on in these slides as well. HikCentral in itself is a fully customizable solution. So if there's a project that you're working on and the HikCentral software can't quite meet those requirements, there is the ability through customizations to make it work how you need it to for the actual site. And a lot of the integration now with third-party systems, such as Paxton access control systems or anything like that, is actually done through HikCentral with a middleware software called Optimus that's going to be released towards the end of this year. So there is a lot of different things that you can do with HikCentral with the actual system itself. So there's many different scenarios that HikCentral can be used. These are kind of your larger scale solutions as a full integrated system. And for sites, we've got the likes of factories, schools and or academies, warehousing, oil and gas industries. There's a lot of different things or application scenarios that it can be used in, but it can also be used in smaller solutions as well. So your shops, as well as the shopping centres. We have got quite a few installations from our customers that are in the actual industry from it. So a few different areas that we can look at with this kind of system. So this is the overall HikCentral architecture. So we've got our HikCentral server in the middle. This can either be connected to the internet or the local LAN on site if it's a separate system and there's going to be no remote access to the server where they're just needing it as a local kind of solution. But this can add in TVI cameras through a DVR or IP cameras directly or through an MVR. You've then got three different options when it comes to clients for viewing the actual cameras. So you've got the HikCentral mobile app. You've also got the web client, which is generally used for the configuration side of things when you're setting up HikCentral as well as the management side of it. And then you have the PC control client, which is generally used for your operator side of things and where you need more fully fledged kind of options for the units. Generally for storage side of things, you'd use, if you're adding an MVR on site, the footage from the cameras would be recorded on the MVR and HikCentral can then interrogate that and you can watch that through on the control clients. But there's also the option to have a pStore server. So this would run on one of our SecureLogic storage servers, and this would allow you to store all of your footage centrally, which would be added into HikCentral as a pStore server. And then this can either work as a backup for your NVRs on site, or it can act as your main kind of storage location for all of your systems that are added into the actual system. And then there's also the hybrid SAN units, which are large kind of storage arrays as well for that side of things. A couple of our key areas that they've added in recently is the mobile dock stations and the intercom systems into HICS Central. So the mobile dock stations work with the body-worn cameras. So for security guards and likes of a shopping centre, they'd be wearing their mobile body cameras. Once they finish for the day, they're then docked onto the docking station, and that can all be interrogated through HICS Central. With the intercom systems, HICS Central can be used to bring those in on larger scale systems, and it will also allow you to actually call through to the control clients from your intercom door station, kind of like concierge desk kind of solution with HICS Central. And then we've also got the access control systems, which have been added in for some time now, and you can link those with cameras and other events through HICS Central, so it makes it a lot more powerful solution. And it also makes it a lot easier when you're managing multiple users, or if you're also having visitors to a site, you can do full visitor management with HICS Central. So then that would allow you to register the users at the reception desk and their permissions terminate at a specific time on site, and you can have them auto signing out as well, which is important for the contactless way of things that we're going towards now, which makes it a lot easier to achieve that as well. And then shortly towards the end of this year, next year, Hikvision are also bringing in a few more features as well, and HICS Central version 1.7 has released today, which brings in even more features, which we'll look at the webinar in the next week or so as well. So this is just kind of an overview of the different functionality between HICS Central and IVMS 4200. So you can see that IVMS 4200 is generally a standalone solution with an additional client, whereas HICS Central can handle up to 100 clients. So that would be 100 users at any given time connected to the system and allowing them to either view cameras or receive events from the HICS Central server itself. HICS Central can be scalable up to 10,000 cameras using a distributed system. It would be 3,000 cameras as a single server, whereas IVMS 4200 can only handle 256 cameras or 50 doors, and HICS Central can handle 1,024 doors added as a full management solution. The other things that HICS Central does over the IVMS 4200 software is the visitor management. So this allows you to create or enroll visitors to your access control system. So you'd log into your web client of HICS Central at your reception desk when a visitor is there. And this can either be done where they're registered beforehand and sent a QR code, which would then allow them to enter the building on the specific day that they're allowed to within specific times as well. There's also the full maintenance dashboard through HICS Central, which we will be taking a look when we get onto the live side of things. And there's also the entrance and exit solution. So this is for parking management or the use with LED matrix signs. So if you had a requirement where you needed a sign to display a license plate number or to display a message automatically from the system, that would need to be a HICS Central solution there with that. And there's also additional integrations with HICS Central using the OpenAPI as well as the Optimus middleware software, which is going to bring a lot more third-party integration in going forward and allowing HICS Central to connect to different third-party systems, so it becomes a seamless solution across the board. And there's also redundancy with HICS Central. So if IVMS 4200 fails on the PC or that PC itself fails, you've then got to install IVMS on another PC or start it up, whereas HICS Central can be configured in a hot standby mode. So there's a secondary HICS Central server that's waiting to take over from the original server on site with that. So this is a comparison between the IVMS 4200 software and HICS Central. So IVMS 4200 is generally used for smaller video systems and smaller access control, where you're not needing a lot of more advanced reporting side of things or advanced user controls, as well as time and attendance and basic alarm systems. And then HICS Central brings in the more kind of complex scenarios or where you need more advanced functionality or alarm handling with the event side of things, which is more documents I'll be sending out after this webinar as well on the email with the slides. I'll send you out documentation with a full comparison between IVMS 4200 and the HICS Central solution as well. So it's a lot easier to compare and will help you understand and decide which solution that you need to go for on a site between the two different softwares there. So when should HICS itself be used? So generally for larger sites that need to be centrally managed. This isn't always the case though. We have customers that have needed an easier way to manage ANPR cameras lists with your allowed and blocked lists with ANPR cameras, which through HICS gives you a web front end where you can just go on, click on your actual list and just type in the license plate, which makes it a lot easier than exporting and then importing the Excel sheets that you'd usually do with a standalone solution or the NVR solution. There's also the need for additional functionality. So if you need in the advanced BI reporting with HICS, so this would be people counting solutions, the fisheye solution with heat mapping. So it allows you to set up a fisheye camera and you can then track to see where the greatest footfall is within a shop, for example, or anything like that, so that users will be able to see which kind of aisles are most popular and where they need to rearrange products to see that as an interesting kind of intelligence function with the system. HICS also allows for automated reporting. So this could be automated emails to send a report of what events have been triggered on a system. That could be done daily, weekly or monthly. It's also the same for access control events or anything like that with the reporting. So if you have an attendance system set up through HICS, you can have a report automatically emailed or generated and then manually downloaded every day, every week or every month. That could be departmental or anything like that. It makes it a lot easier for end users or for HR departments to manage their user base through the system. Also, a lot of people want to be able to have, so if you're on a managed site with a managed network, generally they'd have Active Directory set up with their users. With IVMS 4200, you've manually got to create a user account on IVMS 4200 and set up those permissions on the recorder itself. With HICS, you can actually import Active Directory users directly into the software and then assign them to role permissions through HICS. And that could also be based on Active Directory groups. So if they've got their user base split up into separate groups that have specific roles within the business, they could then match those up with HICS. Can also be done for the access control side of things. So if you're using facial recognition terminals and the users or the system on site already has images uploaded to their Active Directory, which most schools and college campuses and universities do, those can be imported directly into the HICS server to be used as an attendance system or an access control system through there as well. There's also more advanced audit logs. So this will tell you exactly what a user's done on the system, from digitally zooming to live streaming a camera, switching between main and substream. It'll actually tell you directly in the audit logs everything that user's done when they've been logged in and connected to the HICS server. There's also the parking management solution. So if you have a car park on site and you want to manage that if anyone overstays and get an alarm when anyone overstays a certain period, HICS can be used for that, and an alert can be configured to be sent to the control clients or emailed if someone stays in the car park for longer than they're supposed to. And it'll also send you a snapshot of that vehicle and their license plate as well. And you can also configure escalating alarms. So in a control room scenario, if you have an operator sat at their sort of kind of workstation and an event comes through, if that event isn't dealt with or it's actually commented on or anything like that, it can then be escalated to their managers and further up the chain until it's then dealt with. So that can be configured through HICS itself. Some of the key benefits of using HICS as kind of maintenance side of things is the diagnostics on errors. So if an error happens on HICS, it doesn't just give you an error code like the IVMS 4200 software does. It'll actually give you a descriptor of what is causing that event. So if the live view failed, for example, it would tell you if it was a stream server issue, if the camera itself's dropped offline, if the connection's timed out, or anything like that. It'll actually give you a description of exactly what's causing the issue, which makes it a lot easier and quicker for an operator to see what's causing the issue and how to resolve it. It also allows for batch upgrading. So through the web client of HICS Central, you can upgrade all of the cameras, NVRs that are added into HICS Central through the web client without having to do it individually per system. And you can configure it so it could do one at a time automatically, or you could do multiples of the devices in one go. And there's also backup and restoring of the actual system data. So you can do a full daily backup of everything on the HICS Central server. So that could be the event logs, attendance reporting, facial recognition analysis data, anything like that would be fully backed up on the system, and you can save that on a remote location or somewhere secure as a backup system on site to make sure that there's no loss of data if there was a major failure on site there. So within the maintenance section of HICS Central, you've got the advanced health monitoring section as well as the audit trails. So within the health monitoring, it'll give you a full overview of the full system. So this will be the recorders, cameras, any other additional service that you've got added in, and give you a one-shot glance at the full status of the system. So you're not having to click through multiple pages or view each camera to see if it's online. It gives you in a nice graphical interface to see that all in one go. And there's also the history overview, so you can see the recording health status of the full system, so any downtime you've had, and all that will be graphed out as an integrity system analysis through HICS Central. And it's also the full audit logs through that, which we'll also take a look at as well. So it's just kind of a better view of the health monitoring screen. So you can see there that it's showing that there's two cameras that are offline, there's a door that's offline, and then we've got everything else that's in the green there as a normal running status for the system. So this is the intercom side of things through HICS Central. So through the intercom unit, you can actually configure the system so it will actually call through to the HICS Central control clients on your system and play that footage through there. And you can also manually lock or unlock the door through the HICS Central control clients. Usually with intercoms, it's either it calls through IVMS 4200 or it will call through the indoor stations. With HICS Central, you can set a specific concierge button on the door station, which will call the control clients, and then the rest of the buttons can call through to your indoor stations. This also allows you to call through to individual indoor stations. So if you have HICS Central as the management system for the intercoms on site, they can call through to specific indoor stations based on their usernames through there. So another thing that's been brought into HICS Central is the face recognition attendance. So instead of using your standard access control terminals with cards or PIN codes, or even the facial recognition terminals, you can actually do this with a facial recognition camera instead. So the actual attendance on site is done by the camera using HICS Central, and those will be logged as users in the attendance system, and then you can search back through and it'll give their names on screen as they walk through past the camera, and that can all be searched through the attendance logs and would show up on the HICS Central server just as it would using one of the attendance terminals or the access control terminals as well through there. So HICS Central itself is an open platform, so it will integrate with a lot of different third-party systems using the API or the Optimus software, and that can be for alarms, can be through events. With access control, it will actually keep the data synced between Paxton and HICS Central using the Optimus software. So if you create a user on HICS Central, it'll actually copy that data over to the Paxton system as well, and vice versa. So the two systems are linked together and will work in conjunction. The data won't get out of sync between the users or anything like that. It'll keep them both nice and in sync there with those. So HICS Central is based on a licensing system. So there's 4 base licenses that are kind of your activation licenses, and these start at a 0-channel base license, which you could use, say, if you had 2 ANPR cameras that you wanted to manage using HICS Central. You could purchase a 0-channel base license and then just the 2 ANPR licenses, which makes it a lot easier and a lot more affordable for smaller systems that want the easier use of the vehicle plate list management through HIC-Central. And then for larger systems, the base licenses go all the way up to 300 channels for those as well. And then beyond 300 channels, you then purchase additional add-on camera license channels, which can take you up to 3,000 cameras on a single server and up to 10,000 on a distributed server. With base licenses, you then have additional add-on application modules. So whether or not you want to use access control, video intercoms, facial recognition, visitor modules, business intelligence report modules, which includes temperature screening side of things. There's a lot of different things that the software can do, and it's broken down into different add-ons, which you can contact our project team on or our sales team on to find out more about those and what would be required for your specific site. We can go through that with you. There's two kind of additional add-ons to this. So there's an option for stream server. So this will be for larger systems where there's multiple users or a few users that need to view multiple cameras at the same time. Generally, a recorder can handle 128 connections, which can be maxed out quite easily if you have a lot of users on site or if you have a lot of cameras that need to be viewed on a PC or say 2 PCs, that can quickly get maxed out. So you then use HIC-Central, which can handle more streams than the actual recorders, but there is a limitation on that when it comes to bandwidth and when you hit the upper high end of single channels given out from the server, and in which case we then use additional stream servers which can be connected to HIC-Central, which will help load balance for bandwidths and also additional streaming capabilities for the system and make it a lot more manageable for the network to handle as well. There's then also the P-Store recording option. This is a software-based system that would run on our HC storage servers, full RAID storage systems, and that would allow you to schedule backups from MVRs. It's also used for larger scale storage solutions. So if you need a lot of storage that's centralized for the actual cameras, it would be easier to use the P-Store solution with HIC-Central and can be a lot more cost effective than other solutions as well as out there. So I'm just going to cover a couple of the different hardwares that we sell for HIC-Central, and then we'll move on to the actual server-side software itself. This is the HC web server. So this has been specifically built for us to run the HIC-Central backend client. Now this is for kind of larger scale systems, but for smaller installs, say less than 16 channels, so those might just be small ANPR camera systems or anything like that. Below 16 channels, you can actually install and run the software on our HC workstation /S, which is our entry-level workstation. Anything more above that, we'd always recommend going to the web server, which is a dedicated server which will run the full HIC-Central backend for the system, and then our medium and high-end workstations would then connect to that to be able to view the cameras. So on our medium workstations, these can do 33 channels at 720p resolution. I have had more cameras playing back than what's on these lists here, but these are based on Hikvision's recommendations for the actual software, but they can handle more than this on our systems through that. And these units can have 3 monitor outputs that can be used to display the auxiliary screens from HIC-Central. It's a mid-tower desktop chassis with an NVIDIA RTX 2060 dedicated GPU in the machine with an 8th gen i5 CPU. And these are backed by our full tech support as well as full warranty on them of 3 years from our provider as well, our partner, Secure Logic. On our high-end workstations, those can do up to 45 channels at 720p. Which generally when you view in multiple cameras, it's in substream, and this would be much higher, would be beyond the 100 cameras mark, playing back in live view on a single high-end workstation. And this is running off a RTX 2070 GPU with 16 gigs of RAM and a 9th gen i7 CPU. And these are generally for your higher or your larger scale systems, or where there's a requirement to play back lots of cameras at high resolutions on the actual system there. So what I can do now is if I bring up the web client of HIC-Central, Just switch this over. So you can see there, if anyone's used the software before, this is kind of your back-end login to the HIC Central server. So this is what would be used to do configuration, adding any devices or setting up your user accounts. So I can log in. So you can see there, I've gone straight into the physical view, but I can go into our home page. So this is the home page of the HIC Central web client. So you can see we've got a few different tiles there, our physical and logical views. So our physical views are where we'd go to add in our physical devices and also be able to get into the configuration of that device. Now, logical view, it's kind of easy to think of it as a group where we can group multiple cameras or multiple NVRs into a single group, which on a few sites they're broken in per floors or internal and external cameras. We've kind of grouped it differently with the cameras. And there's a few different areas that we'll be looking at in here as well. But what I can do is if I go into license details there, you can see on the license I've got installed on this server, I can add up to 76 cameras. I've currently got 18 channels added onto this one. And I've also got an ANPR camera added to the system. And there's a few other different options there for face recognition, thermal cameras, and your access control and the other bits in there as well. So if I go into the physical view, you can see I've got 3 recorders already added in there, or should I say 1 recorder and then 2 cameras added directly into HIC Central. So I've got one of our Deep in Mind NVRs added in there, as well as an ANPR camera and also our PEZ. It's on our training academy. And we can see there it's given us a device serial number and also the firmware version that's on the recorder and the number of camera channels that are available and the alarm inputs and outputs for that unit. What we can do from this page is if we go click on that little cog there, what that will do is it will take us directly into the web client or web front end of the recorder. So you might have noticed there I didn't need to log into the actual NVR, and that's because HIC Central's already authenticated me as a user. So it makes it a lot more seamless when there's any maintenance that needs to be done or to any configuration direct on the recorder. I can get straight into there and do anything that I need to do with that one. And you can see that the filtered alarm statistic options there because it's one of the Deep in Mind NVRs for the system. So that makes it nice and easy. And what we're going to do is we're just going to check the configuration on the ANPR camera. So if you've used an ANPR camera before, you do need to set up different lanes and your detection line of where a vehicle needs to drive through in order for a plate to be read on the system. So I can go into our road traffic section there, just allow my plugin to run. So you can see we've got our left border and our right hand line drawn there. What we need to ensure on the web front end of the camera is that the linkage action is set to notify surveillance center. This needs to be done for all of the lists on the system. If this hasn't been enabled, HIC Central can't receive the events and can't manage the actual lists on the camera. So that's all enabled and set up as it should be. And our train PEZ is just a standard PEZ on the system. What we can also do through here as well is if the sites were added from remote locations, if it was, for example, a 4G router with a fixed external IP address and that was added into HIC Central, we needed to limit the amount of bandwidth that that recorder can use. We can click on edit here and we can set the amount of bandwidth that this NVR can use through HIC Central. So we can actually manage that through the actual HIC Central software, and it won't use any more than that bandwidth limitation through that. So it's a nice, easy way to manage it globally through HIC Central through that. If we go into access control devices, so this is where we'd be able to add in access control device. So you can see we can see one of our facial recognition temperature screen Minmo terminals there, which I have done a webinar on showing this kind of solution. But if we want to add this in, I can just select it with the tick box there in online devices and click on add to device list. And I can just call this Minmo terminal. And then I can add that in from that. So So you can see now that the Minmo terminal's added into Exental there. So we can see it's got available card readers showing us 2, so you can add 2 card readers to this unit. And same as the NVRs, we can go into the configuration of the actual system, and then we can click on that one there, and it'll actually load up the web front end of the system as well through that there. So that's the Minmo terminals or the access control system. So that could be your card readers or anything like that. And we can also go into video intercoms. So you can see there, we can see a couple of our intercoms that are on the system there. If we wanted to manage them through HICS, we could add those in, and we can set up our room numbers or anything like that and have them configured to ring through to the control clients within the system itself. If we go to our recording servers, so this would be if we had a P-Store server set up on the system, we can add that into HICS and use that as our backup recording solution or our main recording solution for the system. And we can also add in a stream server if you wanted to manage our bandwidth as well. P-Store solution, I have done a full webinar dedicated to P-Store because it is quite in depth on what you can actually do with the solution. So that I'll make sure that that link's sent across to you as well for that one. So what we can do is, now that our devices are adding in, we can go into our logical view here. You can see there we've got our HICS Professional, which is our main server, and then this has been broken down into separate groups for our devices. You can see on our DeeperMind MVR that I've only got one actual camera added to the MVR itself, so it's showing the other 15 channels as offline. What I can do is I can select all the devices, untick the one that I know is online. I'm not using any of the other channels, but by default, unless you select it to only import specific channels, it will import all the PoE ports. So what I can do is I can delete all the unused channels straight from that group. So now it's only got the one channel which has actually has a camera added to on the system itself through there. What we can then do is we could break up into individual groups, or we can add devices, cameras from the other groups into one big group. So what I can do is if I click on the add icon there, and I don't want it to have I can either have it to have a parent area. I can start off with a new complete area in itself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the parent area to be training PEZ. And then I can give it a name as training MPR. If I can click on that, there's then a subgroup within the actual train PEZ group. So you can see there's nothing in there currently. What I can do is I can go to our AMPR, select it, and I can move it into that group there. So then that's showing as the train AMPR through that. I can then select it again and then move it back into its normal group through there. So you can split this off between internal and external cameras, or specific buildings if it's multiple buildings that you've got on site, or even multiple floors, or even rooms as well. If you have a larger scale office and there's multiple cameras per office, you can split those up within the system as well. So it makes it a lot easier for your operators to know which cameras are where and what cameras they need to select, or which groups they need to select if there's an ongoing incident. What we can also do is if we go into our event and alarm section. So our system monitored events are kind of the events that happen in the background on the actual server itself. So these won't necessarily come through onto the control clients. These would be if you need emails or anything like that sending to the system. So we can configure the likes of intrusion detection. So if I set my source type as camera, then go into our triggering event and select intrusion detection. I then click on the DeeperMind MVR and select camera 1. I can then set an action. So I can have it take a snapshot, which will be saved locally onto the HIC server. And I can also configure it to send an email. Now you can see there it's showing a red square around the email template, and that's because I haven't got any set up. But if I wanted to do one, I could click on Add New. I can call this Intrusion Detection. If I add in my email address, you can have an event quote be sent to up to 64 different users or email accounts. For our subject, I can either manually type in the information I wanted to put in the subject heading, or I can select from the auto-generated options. So in the subject of the email, it will put in the event name and the event time. And then in the content, we can put the event name, the event source, person information if it was access control, vehicle information if it was an ANPR, and we can also set which area it belongs to, and we can click on add. So you can see there we've got an email template set up, and once the event's triggered, it'll then send that email with the event information that we selected there to my email address on the system. What we can also do is set an active control. So this will be the threshold in seconds before when an event's triggered from when it can be then triggered again on the system. So you can set time delay on when it can be actually re-triggered on the server itself, which by default is 15 seconds, but that can be set to what your requirements are for that. So I click on add in there, and that's succeeded. What we can also do is if I go into this event to edit it again, we could trigger the PEZ. So the PEZ that we've got added into the system, I can select that there, and I can set it to go to a specific preset or patrol, and this can be globally across your HIC Sentinel server. So it doesn't matter if the site is in a different area or it's a separate physical MVR or anything like that. I can configure it so that the intrusion detection on one camera or one MVR can actually trigger a preset on another system, as long as it's added in HIC Sentinel to go to a preset, patrol, or even a pattern if I wanted to there. So I can resave that again in there. So we've also got the option for user-defined events. So I can call this one start alarm and stop alarm. So these events can be used as a double tap knock effect. So you could have intrusion detection on one camera, motion detection on another. So if someone detects triggers on the second camera first, it won't actually trigger an event on HIC Sentinel. It's got to trigger the first camera first and then the second. So that can help with kind of your false alarms or anything like that. Makes it a much more usable kind of alarming system. So if I go into the alarm section, this is where we'd configure it through to events or alarms to actually go through to the control clients or specific users. So this is when the system is actually alarming someone. So we click on the add icon there, and we can do it for an ANPR camera, which you can see there's no events configured for that yet. Got to go into our vehicle section first. So what I'll do is if I click on camera, and if I search for line crossing for this one, and select our DeeperMind MVR and camera 01, I can set which users on HIC Sentinel that I want to receive it to. So you can see at the moment we've only got one user account, which is our admin user selected there. And we can also relate multiple cameras to the actual event itself, and we can set that to be the live view. So when intrusions, line crossings triggered on the camera, it'll bring up a pop-up on HIC Sentinel with the live view, and I can relate multiple cameras to that if I wanted to. I can also have it capture a picture. We can even have it automatically display on a smart wall. So if you have a decoder set up on site that's added into HIC Sentinel, you can have it automatically configured so that any events that are triggered will pop up on the video wall, and you will be right there for the operators to see on the actual system for that there. So restrict event handling time. So if the actual notification that's come through to the HIG Central control client isn't dealt with or seen by anyone within a specific time frame, you can then have the HIG Central server trigger another event. So this can be an alarm output on a recorder, which is connected to a sounder or a flashing light in the control room. So it makes it a lot more predominant as an alarm that's not being dealt with by the system from there. So we can add that in. From here, we can also manually actually trigger the alarm. So instead of having to trigger the event come through, which you might be able to hear there through that, I'll just acknowledge this alarm for the system. So now that's acknowledged through there. So that came straight through as a manual trigger on my system. So if I move this across there, you can see that the alarms come through into the alarm center, and I've been able to click on that there. It's taken a capture from when I actually trigger the event manually. It's actually taken 2 captures as I've got configured through there, and I can enter a mark in saying this was a test triggered, which would then show on the audit logs the remarks that were made on any events that were acknowledged on the system. And I can just acknowledge that alarm, and that's been dealt with. So it's cleared off the alarm center through there, which makes it easier to handle on larger systems or where they need to report on what's being done with the actual alarms that are being triggered through the system. So what we can do now is if I go into our vehicle section, so what I can do is I can create a vehicle list. So I can call this dynamic list and add that in. So usually on an ANPR camera, you can have a loud list or, for example, a blocked list. It's only 2 lists that you can do. With HIG Central, you can relate multiple lists or have a camera trigger off multiple lists that are added into HIG Central. It's nice and easy to add in a new license plate or remove one as well. So if I want to add in my vehicle, I can click on add. I can type in my number plate. I can set which vehicle type it is, whether or not it's compact car, bus or anything like that. And that would link up to the TCM ANPR cameras, the higher end ANPRs that can actually see which colour a car is, what make it was, or anything like that. On the standard ANPR cameras, they're only for reading the license plates. To use those additional functions, it would need to be one of the TCM cameras. What we can also do is set our effective period. So this is kind of like our allowed times or how long this vehicle is going to be added into the plate list. So for example, a holiday park, they may only want a vehicle added to be able to open the barrier for 3 days during the time that they're booked in at the holiday park. With HIG Central, they can do this on the fly through the web client and manually set those in there. We can also type in the details of the person, which will show up when they drive through. This can be done using the persons list. If you've imported or configured access control, there'll already be a persons list created, but you can also manually enter those in. And I can just click add, and that has now added my vehicle as license plate on the actual system. What I can then do is if I go to event and alarm and go to our alarm section again, click on add. If I go to ANPR, you can see there's now 2 options. So a license plate matched event and a license plate mismatched event. And then I can select different vehicle lists that I've created, which is my dynamic list. So when a license plate's mismatched on my vehicle, I then select the source as the ANPR camera. I can configure the system so it will capture a picture on the unit and save that. So anytime a vehicle is detected by the ANPR camera now and it's not my vehicle, it would trigger an alarm or a capture through the system. If we want to trigger an email or an automated email alert, we can select ANPR in our system monitored event and go to mismatched and select our ANPR camera again, and we can then action this event, and we can configure it to send an email, and we can call this ANPR trigger, add an email address, and add in mine. Detected as the subject. And then in the actual content of the email, I want to put in the vehicle information, the event time, the event name, and the event source. And I've also got the option to attach an image. When the event's triggered, it will also attach an image to the email. So that's been added in to the system. So now what else we can look at onto our Hexentral server is if we go into our security settings here. So this is where we cover any kind of users onto the Hexentral server itself. So you can see there's two basic roles that are being created, an administrator role and an operator role. I'm currently logged in as the administrator on the system, but we can go in and create a new role and call this normal user. We can copy permissions from existing roles that have already been created. So generally the easiest way to set up Hexentral is to create your most basic kind of user role originally, and then build up your more complicated roles based on that. Help you save a lot of time and make it a lot easier to manage on the system. For this user role, I only want to be able to see the ANPR camera on site, so I can hide the other devices through the system and break that down further. If it was an MVR or a specific group that I wanted them to see, but only specific cameras, I could break that down within the resource access section through there. If I go into user permission, this is where I can break down whether or not they're able to play back, live view, which events they're able to receive, whether or not they're allowed to lock footage or anything like that. You can even set it so that a user isn't allowed to log out of Hexentral, so they can't actually close the software. That needs to be done by an administrator by switching the account through the system, so that can all be controlled by the user roles. And then when I go to create a user, in the users tab, I've got the option to import domain users. So if you have Active Directory on a site, you can import your full Active Directory users into Hexentral and then assign those to specific roles, and they'll be able to log in with their normal credentials that they'd use on their PCs as they normally would. If I wanted to create a new user, I can call this test user, and I've got to assign a password by default, and I can also give them email address through that, and then I can assign them to specific roles, and also assign multiple roles to a user, so they're not just restricted. Or if you need a user to have basic permissions like everyone else, but then be also added into a more advanced role, and that can be done as well. So you can break that up and add them onto extra permissions as and when needed through the actual server itself, which makes it nice and easy to manage and change between different user roles through that. We can also do is if we just have a quick look into the system side of things, and if we go into our report section, so this is where we can create automated reports that can be emailed daily or weekly. So you can see we can do either an Excel sheet or a PDF format. So this can be a report of all the events that have been triggered on the system, any alarms, vehicle analysis, people counting, any attendance logs, device logs. So if you've had devices going offline or anything like that, you can have those automatically generated in a report that's then emailed to specific users on the system as and when needed to that there for that. What we'll do is we'll move on to the control client side of things. This is your main kind of use of HIC Sentinels. This way you do all your playback, your actual monitoring of the actual system itself. So what we can do is if we go into this here, we can actually edit the different tiles. So this can just be general monitoring. So we can actually change those. Obviously, these are the general monitoring side of things. Just our live view and playback is in the monitoring tile, access controls in door and elevator, and our entrance and exit with the car parking management solution through HIC Sentinels in there as well. This is what an operator would use on sites. This is the front end that they'd see of HIC Sentinel. If they're logged in with a user account, only has permission, for example, to just live view and play back, they'd only be able to see the monitoring icon. They wouldn't be able to see the others. It would just be the monitoring icon in the middle of the screen. So they wouldn't even know that, or wouldn't be able to see that they don't have permission to access something. It just wouldn't actually show them on the software. If you limit permissions on IVMS 4200, they may still have the permissions. They would still be able to see the actual options on IVMS 4200, but they would then get an error saying no permission when they try to then access that system that we don't have permission for. So what we can do is if we go into our health monitoring, just under our maintenance section here. So this gives us a full overview of HIC Sentinel, any devices that are added to it, the server status. So you can see our management server is currently normal. There's no error showing there. And we've got 3 abnormal items on the system. So we can click on abnormal. What that will do is that will take us into the resource status, and it will tell us what's causing the issue. So you can see there the recording status on the devices isn't set up, so they're just not set up for recording at the moment through the system. So it's a nice easy way to see in real time exactly when you connect in the current status of the actual full solution. So if we go back into home and go into our monitoring section, I'll load up our ANPR camera and our train PEZ. So those both in live view, and you can see in the bottom, you can get a real-time vehicle record of vehicles as they're coming in. It would be the same for access control, so the operator will be able to see the real-time events come through on the system itself. What we can also do is we can create specific views. So I've got these 2 cameras loaded up here. I can go into the save icon. So I can call this cams. I can either save it in a public folder, so this would be where multiple users can have access to the same view, or I can save it so it's only myself that can actually see or use that view. So if I click on that and click save, and then stop these, I can then bring up those 2 cameras as a saved view on my system there. So it makes it a lot nice and easy to bring those through on the actual system. And playback is in the same window, so we can go in here and we can just switch from live view straight into playback for the actual system. We also have the vehicle search option, so you can see I've got the ANPR camera selected there, and I can search for any number of plates that have been detected on the system between specific times, or I can set it to today. So if I click search, that will show you any plates that have been detected on our ANPR camera through HIC Sentinel throughout the day. I can also click on them to see the captures of the vehicle as it's come through on our system. It's taken a snapshot of that vehicle. If the license plate hasn't been read properly, I can go in and manually edit it so it's correct on the system, and any additional information would also show there as well for the actual detection result through there. If I go back into our home page and go into entrance and exit, this would be for the parking management solution, which I have done a video on covering the full solution, the 1.6 updates, which covers all of that in there as a parking management solution for that. If we go into our audit trails, so we can search select what we want to see on the system and search our audit logs for, and we can select which users we want to actually search for as being used in the system. So if I select admin and then click search, you can see there it's logged everything that I've done on the system, the time that I've done it and what I have accessed. So you can see the Train PEZ and the resource PEZ on there. So I can see that I've added an email template, I've stopped the live view, I've created a new view, changed any alarm settings, I've tested an alarm configuration through there, and it'll also give me the IP address that user has created that event from, where they've actually done that from on there as well, which you can see is the local host IP address, because it's on the same machine through there. So all in all, Hexental is a really powerful solution. It's kind of just an overview of the actual system, but there is additional videos that I've done and webinars that we've hosted, and some that we've got upcoming that go more in depth into some of the other areas of Hexental, because it is quite in depth in what you can actually do when you want to use the more advanced features of that. So if you've got any questions, my contact details are on screen there. So if you want to get in contact with myself or the rest of our project team, if you just drop an email or give us a call at Dynamic CCTV, or contact one of our BGM team, they'll be happy to help. And thank you for joining me today.